Small Bay Flex is all the rage in commercial real estate right now, and we are bringing a home run hitting lineup to the show this week to talk about it, from developer to steel guy to the man who literally wrote the book on flex space. Welcome to this week's edition of Storage Unlocked, brought to you by PB Brown General Contractors. Proud to welcome to the show my boss, president, founder of S3 Partners, Barry Sherman, Kiwi II Construction founder, president, Wayne Woolsey, and as I said, the guy who wrote Flex Space Domination with his team at Flex Parks USA, Cody Payne. First and foremost, all three of you, thanks for taking some time out to join the show.
Good to go.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys greatly. Wayne, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that I'm looking out my window at about a dozen guys from Kiwi II putting up the third floor steel on a self-storage facility in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. So that's been really fun over the last few months to watch you guys. Of course, Wayne sponsors my other podcast. So what a pleasure to get to see exactly why people come to you for steel. We're going to go around the room real quickly with a few different rapid fire questions. We're going to try and keep these to one word if at all possible. I tried to phrase them so you can get away with one word, but if you got to go over a little bit, no problem. And then we'll dig a little deeper on why flex space has become such a big asset class, attracting so much interest around the country. Cody, I'm going to start with you. Small Bay Flex, baby, adolescent, adult, where are we in the life cycle of this asset class?
It's got probably adolescent. It's got a long way to go.
Love it. Wayne, hotter for developers right now calling you for steel. Are you seeing still more people, obviously 30 years in storage? Are you starting to see more projects put across your desk in the flex space?
Yes, we are. Yep.
Love it. And Barry, better development returns right now. Obviously, S3 Partners, 11 projects that you guys are dealing in right now across the spectrum of storage and flex. As you're looking at underwriting models right now, what's showing better returns?
It's flex today, period.
Cody, coming back to you, most understood tenant type excuse me, the biggest tenant type that's coming into this space. Who are you getting for tenants in Small Bay Flex?
Well, I mean, your biggest pull is your trades, right? Your contractor base, but you've also got that expanding pool of e-commerce, gyms, fitness studios, advanced automotive, whether it's, hot rod upgrades, wrap shops. I mean, so they're quite a bit. And then you got your sports related tenants as well.
It took us less than 4 minutes to get Cody to bring cars into the conversation, which doesn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form. This guy's an enthusiast for sure. Wayne, come back to you. Harder to build from a steel guy's perspective, storage or flex, or similar?
Yeah, similar. Look, it's apples and oranges, but for us, it's the steel building, right? So, there's certain things that are more complex, but there's other things that are standard. Yeah.
Love it. Barry, one design decision, one piece of this puzzle that's an absolute must early on for a successful flex project.
Yes. Well, there's going to be more in one tab, but I'll give you, it's got to.
We got an hour. We'll get into more than that. But
it's got to perform.
The big one.
It's got to perform. It's got to have circulation. It's got to perform for the user.
Love it. We're going to get into a little bit more in-depth answers now and really kind of try and drive into. And the whole purpose of this roundtable, Cody and I were down in Atlanta last month at the Small Bay Summit, nearly 700 people. And I can't tell you how many of those were people that I've seen at self-storage shows before. A lot of people looking to get into ground-up development in the Small Bay Flex space. As Barry said earlier, storage not showing quite as much return right now. And to Wayne's point, seeing more flex deals come across his table now than self-storage. I want to really kind of dig into what makes a successful Small Bay Flex development. Cody, I'm going to start with you again. A lot of what we hear in this asset class, that draws people to it is that it's been underbuilt. What does that mean, that there's not enough product for what people think is supposed to happen? Why are people saying that? Why are people saying Small Bay Flex has been underbuilt?
Well, it has historically, because, back when I got started, it was literally just a contractor tenanted projects, right? And that's, was mostly the infill stuff. since the tenant pool has really expanded exponentially, pulling from office, retail, showroom, more light industrial. All that's done is just continue to expand the demand and the tenant pool for these projects, and especially in the areas that have a lot of home growth, right? Especially major metros that are experiencing expansion and things of that nature, and even in secondary and tertiary markets. There's always a need for that, and it's not just from your subcontractor based guys. It's from your entrepreneurs, your e-commerce, your everyone else that is pretty much I consider most people that are tenants that are in here are some type of entrepreneur. So that expanding entrepreneur base just continues to grow, which creates more and more demand.
Barry, I know S3 obviously involved in a lot of projects right from the beginning, going through the entitlement phase, having to deal with municipalities, planning and zoning departments. What's happening on a municipal level that is keeping this asset class underbuilt?
Well, zoning, just like storage went through for over years, we had to reinvent it from the industrial parks to main and main. And today is we're either repurposing, value add opportunities or building greenfield. We still got to address the key zoning planning issues that we face today. There's still stormwater, those utility items, but today, the standards, the bar's been raised. So we've got aesthetics, we've got screening, we've got signage items, all the things we need to take into account that makes a successful development.
When I want to come to you, ultimately at the end of the day, you got to build something for a price that what you can rent it for justifies on the back end. What are the drivers on the building side and the steel side of it? What are the differences between storage and flex? And are you able to get close on the steel side price wise to go build if you're building 80,000 square foot of flex versus 80,000 square foot of storage?
Yeah. In a multi-story aspect, you could probably look at square foot numbers and compare them. But when you look at a single level building and a single level flex, they're twice as high, the spans are twice as far, therefore the loading is twice as much to the foundation. So, things certainly change when you look at, building type to building type. And, these are bigger and they span further. So therefore they're going to cost more.
I'm going to come back to that a little bit. I want to talk about clear height and some of the drivers of that. Barry, I want to come back to you a little bit. You're going to pay a little bit more for the building when you're building flex versus you're building storage. You've got a site that's 6 acres. Let's say all things are equal. You're going to get the same cost per square foot on the storage building versus the flex building. Are you going to build storage in that site? Or are you going to build flex in that site if all things were equal?
Well, that is, I think, and these guys do too, that's going to depend on the metrics of the area. That's going to be site specific to where the demand is, et cetera. So pending the site size or the construction costs, those are things going to impact it. But, we're way early on deciding if we're going to go flex or storage. And today, we're spending more time searching for flex sites, and they've got a specific buy box to them. They get very specific. So
dive into that for me, because it's where I was trying to frame the question to get the answer I wanted, which is a classic journalist mistake. I'd get smacked by Bob Lissett at Syracuse University right now. You said you're searching more for flex right now than you are for storage. What's going on in the market that's making you have your team spend more time looking at flex?
Yeah, we're just sitting at that lull that I think everyone is speaking to in the storage market. We're in a shift right now. Everyone's watching the various asset classes. As we came out of COVID a handful of years ago, it was storage, but it was boat and RV, and then iOS came in. And flex has been growing. It's a reinvention of all the way back to the 90s of how we look at this product type. And 30 years later, yes, we're reinventing it based on how we're doing business today and all these other asset classes that Cody mentioned earlier. It's just a different product. We're not doing a ton of tenant finishes in each of these spaces. These want to be easily accessible, move-in ready.
Mm-hmm. Cody, a natural follow-up question for you, who exist more on the side of selling these assets than you do as a broker than a leasing agent, but you've been around this industry for a long time. Two-part question to Barry's point about, not a ton of TI, about having a box that's ready to go. How important is that to the tenant base you talked about earlier, as far as your tradesmen to not have to take months to get ready to move into it? And then the second piece of that question is, how have you seen the tenant type for this asset evolve over the years?
So as far as, spaces that are kind of move-in ready, I mean, I will tell you, tenants that look at space, because, I started my career leasing. We've got guys here that lease. I can tell you they're usually making a decision relatively quickly, maybe not as snap finger fast as storage, but a little, but very quickly, usually within that week, and then signing very quickly and then moving in a month or so later. So as far as the movement goes, they are very, very quick. So having something that's ready to go is crucial. The good thing about small bay is in most cases you're just doing an office and a restroom, so that's usually pretty easy to have a spec unit ready to go. As far as the evolution, I mean, look, it started evolving quite a bit, starting in 2015. Because when I got started, I mean, it was just your landscapers and plumbers and people like that, but and really low rent product too at that time. Well, what's happened since then is, you take that base, right? Your general contractors that come and fix your home and things of that nature. Those guys are making well over 80% increase in pay just from like 10 years ago. And so what they're able to pay then compared to what they're able to pay now is two very different numbers. And then, every stage over the past 10, 15 years, we've had more and more things come in. So like when COVID hit, e-commerce kind of blew up. And so now it's very common to see e-commerce tenants in a lot of these spaces, which we didn't see 15, 20 years ago. So you've got that expanded base. Your training facilities, things of that nature, all these tumble and cheer and basketball training and things of that nature, your jiujitsu gyms like what you go to, like a lot of those. I mean, that's expanded quite a bit because, some of those people that did like a lot of the martial arts and whatnot, for a long time, they were in retail centers.
Mhm.
And because of retail
I
pricing,
can tell you the rent was not fun.
oh yeah,
I'll just
no.
say that.
Yeah, and even when I did, karate for a long time, they were always in retail centers. And so, but now a lot of those guys have moved to the flex space because they can get a lot of times a little bit more space for a substantial amount less in price. And so you've got a lot of that retail style tenant that has moved over because of retail pricing. And then also a lot of those guys, and I can tell you because, we go talk to a lot of these tenants, some of these retail people that have come over, they don't need the frontage that they used to need, right? Because of online presence, social media, things of that nature, they don't need that as much. So they're able to come to these parks and be just as successful while saving on cost.
Crazy to see the evolution. I bought my martial arts school in 2003, and Google Maps didn't exist where you could just have it drive you to wherever you wanted to go. Now you got Waymo that doesn't even need a driver. It'll take you there. Kind of crazy. Wayne, I want to ask a question to Cody's point about the expanding user base in this asset class. You're starting to get people that want a little bit nicer looking facility than maybe 50 years ago when it was a guy building the space for himself. Talk to me a little bit about what's happening on your side of things. And listen, we price these buildings out. If you're starting to get really fancy brick and mortar finishes, it starts to price yourself out of being able to build something. Talk to me about what you're able to do now with steel and steel paneling to make a building really look aesthetically pleasing to a business owner.
Yeah, so it's inside and out, right? So to answer your brick question, outside, the insulated panel systems where, they're almost, a flat panel now that gives you that full-on storefront downtown retail project, vertical, horizontal, then with some bandings, and then you throw in a light gauge awning to the outside of it. It's amazing what a metal building can look like. And I like it, obviously it's a less weight on the building. You start adding brick and masonry to a building, we're just adding weight. And anything weight driven by the size of these buildings equals a wind load we're going to take care of. And it just adds to the cost of the building. Inside, I think, really hasn't changed much with a standard building. What's changing is we've gone from, just doing 20 by 30 bays to full on a 20,000 square foot building that if a gym wants to rent the whole thing, they can. If they want to put 8 bays in there or 4 bays in there, we're building these buildings with 100% flexibility. I think that's the biggest thing that's changed from the single story on steroids to almost a pre-engineered building that has big flexibility, but the outside look of a retail center that's, you know, not main on main, right? So
Appreciate it. We're going to dive deep into that. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Stick with us. I want to give a second for our sponsor. Storage Unlocked is brought to you by PB Brown. Over $1 billion in ground-up construction delivered from single-story to Manhattan high-rise. Institutional grade, engineered for performance, and designed to stand out. Great storage catches the consumer's eye, drives traffic, and helps lease-up happen faster. From Manhattan to Miami, California to Hawaii, PB Brown is the GC to trust for your multi-million-dollar storage development. Cody, you're the guy on the panel that has leased this stuff, that sells this stuff. I want to kind of dive into, Wayne brought up this idea of a 20,000 square foot box that you can kind of decide what it's going to look like. In your mind, what's an ideal setup for one of these projects?
I mean, if you're talking tenant size, right, the most ideal tenant size is, going to be around 1,500, 1,800 square feet. When you start going over that, you start going 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 square feet, your tenant pool just starts to shrink at that point. And so, when you're designing these things, like what Wayne was saying, I mean, yeah, you can go in there and you want to really always have it set up to where it can increment easily, right? Where it can demise off too. So if you're doing a 20,000 square foot run, if you can do 2,000 square foot units where a tenant can go 2, 4, 6 if they need to, because that's what makes them flexible, is because it allows these tenants to expand or downside if need be. And so you always want to keep that ability to do that and not hinder yourself with too much finish out or not having the increments done right to where you can do it, because you're also keeping these separately metered. So if the space increments aren't right when you build it, and now you're kind of moving electrical lines all over the place, you start getting into a lot more re-tenanting, finish out, and things of that nature, and capital items on tenant turnover, which you really want to stay away from, which you can stick within it very easily as long as you go in it with a plan of, hey, these are going to be our unit sizes and this is how we're going to do it, and you can't move the walls but within these increments.
I'm going to go to you, Barry. You guys are building a few of these. I say you guys, we're building a few of these, right? I'm going to include me in the S3 team. I got that label under my name too. We're building a few of these. I'm the podcast guy though. So when I say we, I'm purely involved on the periphery of making the real decisions that happen here. How important is it when you go into one of these projects that you really understand what your project's going to look like and what that layout's going to be from a cost perspective?
Sure, great question. And certainly you're a part of it, Thad.
Feel free to praise my questions anytime you want. As the podcast guy, I'll take that as much as I can get it.
Yeah, the numbers work in both directions. The return profile's got to make sense for all the investors, right? And so as we touch everything where Cody's going to be able to lease it out at X rates, okay, or sell it for X amount, Wayne's got to help deliver a number that at the end of the day, the return profile is going to work. So we're studying everything from the land bases to revenue to property taxes to just the overhead and how we're handling all that and passing that through, or from a global development standpoint. And even like storage, some of our biggest costs today, the biggest unknowns that we spend the majority of the time on is our site development costs. What's Mother Nature bringing to us? What's that grading look like? Utilities, underground. Because once we get to the slab and we go vertical, we tend to have a sense of what Wayne and the world of construction is going to run us on average, besides what the jurisdiction is going to drive from a finish standpoint. So there you go, Thad.
Appreciate that. I'm going to dive into that question a little bit more from a layout standpoint. You talked earlier when we were doing the rapid fire about circulation, about setting up the park in a way that's functional to the people that are ultimately going to be your tenants. Cody and I talked about this way back when he was on on my other podcast with me on Stories Behind the Door that Kiwi II is so kind to sponsor, about, listen, they're not going to come and rent from you if they can't get in and out of their business functionally. What does a site typically look like from number of buildings? How are those buildings set up? Are you building a bunch of different individual buildings? I talked about the project that Wayne's crews are putting steel up. That's a 3-story, 35,000 square foot footprint. Obviously, we're not going vertical there. But what's a typical building look like and a typical site look like in terms of number of buildings, et cetera?
Sure. I think you're tossing that back to me, Thad. So I'll
I am.
dive
I
in.
came to you twice in a row. That's you. You send me a
All
check
right.
every month. Wayne and
Okay.
Cody, not as much. So
Okay. All right. Fair enough. You know, Thad, again, it's going to get back to the underwriting. Our typical sites, if it's straight small bay flex, is going to be between maybe 4 and 6 acres, depending on our site requirements with stormwater detention, setbacks, etc. But we get into key circulation, drive aisles, parking with standards to that jurisdiction. Okay. We're trying to meet the needs of our product, of our user at that point. From a building standpoint, you know, you might be the small bay flex developer that says, hey, I'm going to sprinkle everything. I want to maximize. You know, today in most current IBC codes, we're going to get up to 12,000 square feet before we can sprinkle. So we might have a 20,000 square foot building with a firewall in there and decide not to sprinkle it. So we're going to get very strategic based on the use profile to the building code, the jurisdiction, and the site of how we're laying out buildings and how many. Okay. And then we're going to look at the site conditions to see, are we main on main? Do we want that storefront on the front? Do we want that front park, rear load? You know, is it front park, front load? And again, the unique thing about small bay flex is we're seeing it can be defined in so many different ways, much more differently than we have with storage over the years. So a lot of flexibility there, but a lot of programming that's going to be key.
Cody, I'm going to ask a natural follow-up question there because one of the very first things you ever told me when we first met each other was, don't build a storage facility with flex in it on the same parcel. Like that's not a good way to go about it. I'm gonna ask the question of, in your history and in you know, the hundreds and hundreds of deals you've dealt with over your career in small bay flex, how important has it been to successful projects that they actually know exactly what they're setting out to do with their park, that they have a plan for what's happening and it's not kind of a mishmash of different, you know, size units and what they're trying to be?
I mean, it's important, especially when you're talking about the buyer pool, right? Like who the buyer pool is. And so if you're building something that's kind of a hodgepodge, and as you're building it, you're kind of pointing and shooting, you're going to build something that is kind of like, we sometimes call those the Swiss Army knife. And just because they kind of do a little bit of everything, but sometimes your highest paying buyers want consistency. And so that's what sometimes these people see. That's why we also say you don't want to have self-storage and flex on the same parcel, because your highest paying flex buyers don't want storage, your highest paying storage buyers don't want flex. And so, because they like consistency. And so there's no difference when people are looking at this kind of stuff and you've got, you know, some iOS mixed in over here, some larger units over here, some individual buildings over here. Consistency is very key when you're looking to sell and perform a product. It's great to offer a lot of various different things, but not all the time does the market need each one of those things.
It sounds good in principle at the beginning that
It
you have that
does.
variety to offer to the public, but when you go to sell it, you kind of limit who your buyer pool is. He brought up this idea of high price, Wayne, and I'm going to come to you. How easy is it? And I'll share my experience as I talk to people in the industry, kind of in a unique position. People come and ask me questions about stuff, about flex projects all the time because they see me on social media so much talking about it. I've seen guys $220 hard cost on a small bay flex project. Other guys, you know, $80, $85. So I go to you as the steel guy. How easy is it for people to start making decisions that really change the scope of what your cost is going to be like? And how do they avoid that?
Yeah, I think it's having a good team to help you along the way, you know, and not just go off and say, I want this big box with a red bow around it. How do I get there? And to Barry's point, you know, we've gone into some sites where you go, why would you even buy this site? It's, you know, it's on a massive slope. It's triangle. You can't get, you know, the utilities to it. And then some of the other things that big cost is like, you know, you're individually metering both water and power. People don't understand all the cost drivers there. You know, so it's easy to start at $80 and end at $200 because you just go, that's 10 grand, that's 10 grand, that's 10 grand. And before you know it, they're just blowing their budget. So I just, you know, I really think it's a team of people. Really, you know, getting the project in and saying, where do you want to be? What makes sense? You know, like Barry can come in and say, if it makes sense at 150, this is what you can build for 150. Are you okay with this? And having a realization that you need to stop and build this product. And maybe it's a hybrid design. Maybe it's, full retail on the front, but when you walk around the corner, it looks like a pre-engineered building in the back, and just do what you can to make your number. And that's what will make the project successful. And to Cody's point, a lot of the times when you start, you do not know who all your tenants are going to be. So you do need to have some flexibility at a low cost to make the unit mix what the tenants want. I've gone back, and if I've built 10 parks, I've probably gone back to 4 of them and adjusted units for the owners so they can sell to a unit to a tenant because they only want a certain space, or they wanted twice the much space. Can we put a hole in this wall? And we've done the gamut. We've seen it all.
Barry, I'm going to jump to you now. How do you kind of try and as much as you, because we know and God bless you, Wayne, and I'm glad that you had to go back to 4 things because you got a family to feed too, but we want to try and avoid having you come back as much as we possibly can. Barry, how do you plan ahead to, and what's going in? Because this is still new. I know Cody says, we're at adolescent, but we're not like, close to voting age adolescent. We're more like still watching tweener shows adolescent. How do we make sure that we have enough information and we understand ahead of time to avoid having to go back and make a bunch of changes on a project?
Sure. I'm going to go back to the pre-planning, programming, engaging the right team that's got the experience, that's made the mistakes already, unfortunately, have learned from them, and really has a sense of what the industry is driving at, what the tenants are. So you're surrounding yourself with Cody on that side and a variety of other professionals that are giving you good advice. You've got Wayne on board and his team who's bringing the education of the dollars, the timing, and the sequence. So, it's like any good, successful development. It's a lot of pre-planning up front, and from there, ideally you've done your homework. There's always going to be that margin of adjustment along the way, but you hope it's small enough that it doesn't impact your returns and causes a lot of times that Wayne or other subs have to return.
Cody, I apologize for a second because I'm gonna divert this conversation. Wayne and Barry and I, of course, I've spent way less time than these two in the storage industry, but we spent a lot of our career in self-storage, and we've seen, I think Barry, you were talking to somebody the other day and said it's the longest stretch of challenge you've seen in the storage industry in the 30 plus years you've been in it. How much of that has been overdevelopment in the last few years that has caused some of that? And I guess where I'm going with this is, how do we avoid that happening with all the attention that's coming to small bay flex? How do we try and insulate the industry from having a bunch of people come in and listen, at the end of the day, you're going to go raise money and you're going to have people investing in projects to make sure that they're successful and we don't see kind of the path that storage has gone down the last few years? I'll start with you, Barry, and Wayne, I'm going to have you chip in on this as well.
It's a little bit yet to be seen. I mean, again, we've had cycles in the small bay flex over decades now of where they've been built and who they're targeting from a user standpoint. To Cody's point, today we're seeing more in the small bay flex side of 2,000 square feet. That has come down from years ago when we started having spaces that were clearly open at 30, 40,000 square feet. But, today it again is going to be pre-planning and programming and really knowing your market. And again, time will tell on that because competition is live, and so there's my 2 cents then.
I love it. Wayne, I'm going to come to you. You said something earlier. Sometimes you see a site and you're like, why the heck did you buy this parcel? And I get it. Like, you're running a business. And if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to build something, it's your job to give them a price and go build that. But how do we kind of avoid some of, and this long term, like, it doesn't help Kiwi II if all of a sudden there's a massive slowdown in the industry because a bunch of stuff got built that maybe in hindsight shouldn't have gotten built. How do you step into that and kind of try and mitigate some of the long-term harm that might happen?
Yeah, I guess there's 2 answers to that. One is, I think all of a sudden there's a lot of awareness of flex. There's a lot of there's a lot of marketing of flex at the moment, and I think I've never seen that before. You know, we've been doing flex type products for 10, 12 years, right? So it's not necessarily new to us. The concept of the smaller bays, like Barry said, is definitely new. We're seeing the more 1,500, 2,500, maybe 3,000, I would say, is probably the average. We're seeing a lot of that space. The other thing we try and do is get in front. You know, there's projects that come to us that maybe already have civil, maybe already have architectural, you know, pre-design. They're 30% into it. The planning department's already seen it, so they don't want it. They're not going to allow changes. So, you know, I think for us, we try and get in there on the backside and slow down the problem. We would certainly love to get in the front more often and put our hand up and say, you know, you need to pivot, you need to change this. And that's all part of just getting out there, getting exposure, and letting people know that, you know, there's a group out there that can help you get the right product. Otherwise, you will end up at $200 a square foot and not have a unit that's rentable. Long-winded answer, but it's really
it was a perfect answer. You know, it's funny because I said multiple times you sponsor my other podcast, and every time I talk about you guys at the front and back of the podcast, KiwiConstruction.com, just in case you want to check them out, I tell people to get you involved early. So it was interesting. I didn't even have to ask you about that, and you talk about why that's so important, because at a certain point in the process, you can't make changes anymore. And if you're beholden to something that's going to cost you $180 a square foot, it's going to cost you $180 a square foot, you know, where maybe it could have cost you 110 if you'd have gotten some folks in that. And, you know, I'll toot the horn of S3 Partners and, you know, Barry and our team. The earlier you get someone in that knows what the heck they're looking at and actually understands what the market is, the less likely there is. I'm going to toot the horn. You know, nothing kills an industry faster than irresponsible development. So get some people around you that know what the heck they're talking about, and hopefully listen to them. Cody, I'm going to come back to you. I had you sitting on the sidelines there as we went a little bit on the storage side of it, but I rewind to January of 2025, and I called you in like December, and I was like, hey, I want to do this virtual event. I want to talk about small bay flex. We ended up doing a couple of them that you came on. Barry joined us on the second one and talking about this industry. And I think we had 60 people the first time, and we had 75 people the second time, and I was all excited. I saw you in New York City in November at the Small Bay Summit, a live event, 250 people there. Atlanta, there had to be 700 people. They said they only sold 650 tickets, but there were a whole lot of people in that room. For you, who have spent a couple decades in this asset class, what's it like to go to a live event and see 700 people talking about this asset class?
I mean, it's pretty exciting because, you know, just a few years ago, there were no events for FlexSpace. And so you've got several now, right? You got the Small Bay List guys. You've got Flex Connect, you know, with Hamza down and out here in Texas. You've got FlexSpace Nation going on in a couple weeks. And there's a few others that are being curated and crafted. So you're going to be seeing a lot more events, expos, education, seminars, and things of that nature. So it's been great for us because, you know, we've been in it for so long. So it's been great for us because we're one of the first calls a lot of those people make when they're like, hey, we need a cheap free speaker. And it's like, well, here we go, you know? And so
not supposed to tell people I got you for free. We're trying to raise your profile.
You said you were sending an Applebee's gift card, but no, it's been great. And like I said, I mean, you know, as you said, I mean, you know, that one had 600, 700 people there. So it's fantastic to see the amount of people that are coming into it because, I mean, it definitely needs it. I mean, there's so many areas that need more construction. There's a lot of opportunity to still pick up mom and pop, you know, older ownership projects because it's still very fragmented ownerships. And so there's a lot of good value add opportunity to buy existing and things of that nature. So we've got a really good runway ahead. And so, you know, our team, we're always looking to stay, you know, on the forefront of it as possible. But no, I'm excited about all the events. You know, I don't like flying, but we make it happen for any of these.
And I love that you are flying because I get to see every once in a while, which is awesome. We are not going to send an Applebee's gift card. I am going to send a
Yeah,
magnetized S3 Partners logo for you to put on those classic cars that you
there you
love
go.
to drive
Yeah.
around in. I'm going to stick with you for a second. I made you sit on the sidelines for a second. I want to talk about something you said. Still fragmented ownership, right? This is something that we've seen in storage where it's starting to change very drastically, very quickly, while there's still some smaller mom and pop owners. You know, the big boys, the REITs, I think now own over 8,000 of the 20,000 institutional grade self-storage facilities. And the other ones are owned by a lot of big private equity groups. What do you see happening in this space over the next 5-10 years? Do you think that there's a path in small bay flex similar to what storage went through, where you start to see a lot of bigger equity groups? Maybe a REIT comes out of the woodworks. You know, do we see Wall Street money start coming into this asset class?
I mean, I think so. I think you will. I mean, there already are institutions that own small bay. They're usually stricken to infill product only and tilt wall, but their parameters will continue to expand. And what's helping it out too is, unfortunately, some of the other asset classes like office and multifamily and others that are suffering a little bit. That is bringing more and more eyes and attraction to this asset class. And so the same with self-storage. That's why if there's a self-storage event or expo, we go there because that's one of the top groups that's coming into the small bay industrial side. So I think by having all these other asset classes, experiencing those inflation, TIs, tenant turnover, commissions, and time on market for vacancies, this is a very attractive asset class that still has good depreciation value and things of that nature.
Barry, I'm going to swing to you coming to the next question. As I looked at, I spent a year before I came to work for you. I spent a year looking at acquisitions in this space. And as I would look at older product, first of all, I think the average year of build of a existing small bay flex in our country is like 1984. So you're talking about dated product. And a lot of that is like 10, 12 foot. Yeah. We were alive then. I don't know if Cody was alive in 1984. The other three of us were alive there, but we were still adolescent, like small bay flexes. You're talking about buildings that are like 12 foot high. We're now looking at a very different product as we come to this next phase of build and small bay flex. What does an ideal product look like from a size, door standpoint?
Yeah, and I think Cody's touched on it a bit ago from a size standpoint. Anything from 15 to maybe even the mid twos, but on average that sweet spot's at 15.
That was my
18.
fault. I meant to say height.
Well, I'll go there. We're trying to deliver doors that are typically at least 12 wide and 14 high, right? Mm-hmm. And from there, that drives an eve height that gets up to 16 feet. Now, that can all vary again. What does your small bay flex look like? There's so many recipe books out there for it. It's going to diversify. The amenities that we're putting in here from a power standpoint, any kind of cooling standpoint, are you sprinkled? Are you not? Mezzanines, restrooms, etc. But speaking to, the generation of the time period that you spoke to, yes, we had small buildings, we had shorter buildings, and everything has gotten taller because some of the things that we have today in this world has grown. Forklifts have gotten taller, racking has been able to be changed. So all those things have driven things vertically, and also because land costs have too. So, and there've been logistical items there. So that is contributing to the changes. So when we look at a value add product to pick it up, it is different than a greenfield new build on what we might do program wise today. So Cody probably has some good words of wisdom there, but there's my 2 cents.
I'm going to let him add some in a minute, but I want to go to Wayne because you're the steel guy. You're the guy that ultimately is going to control some of that hard cost. If I'm going from 16 foot to 19 foot to maybe 21 foot on a clear, what's the advantage of going higher? What am I paying for that? How much of a cost burden is that ultimately going to add to my project?
Yeah, it's definitely going to add, right? Because you're buying more steel, you're buying more of everything. But, if you look back at these 12-foot tall buildings, even back then we had caravans that were only 8 or 10 feet tall. Now look at what we're driving. We're driving big RVs, big trucks with racks on them. Just as a group, we've all just grown in size, right? So in turn, these buildings
I
have
can
to be
attest to
bigger.
that literally. I
Yeah.
apologize for interrupting. I couldn't avoid the joke.
Yeah. Nah, hey, look, we all see it, but I think, if you look at every foot that you grow, you could probably add $1 to $2 a square foot. Just because now you're taking more lateral loading, you're taking more wind loading, the door gets bigger, you need bigger guides for the bigger door. Do the doors now become in an area where the door needs to be wind loaded versus a standard door? All these things just compound. And then we go back to what I talked about before, right? There's another 10 grand. There's another 10 grand. You need someone to put their hand up. And I want to get back to something I said before about the group. When we're on the calls with Barry's group and we're going through some of these things, we're not afraid as a group to put our hand up and ask the question to the owner, is this truly what you want? Because if this is what you want, we can build it, but you've got to end up being able to pay for it and therefore get a return on it. So it's just so important to have a group around you to help you get from A to B, because it can be a bumpy road.
I'm going to follow up on that question because, Kiwi II, 30 plus years you've been doing this. You'd rather work with the same person over and over again at the end of the day. And so how important is it for you to kind of, help to make sure that they don't do something they can't recover from and come back and hire you on another project?
Very important. And, even to the point where, we spend a lot of time just from an education standpoint, from a napkin, how do we get it started? How do you get from A to B? Here's a great architect. He works in this space. Or, hey, this is a regional job. You really need to speak with these people. So from a network standpoint, again, with 30 plus years, we've got a lot of network friends that we can bring in and help you get a project to the starting point where it finishes or where it starts, right? So, yeah.
Love it. And again, as I've said repeatedly, gonna try and toot the horn and stand on the pulpit of being responsible and surrounding yourself with people who've been there and done that and know what the heck they're doing. And listen, sometimes that costs you money, but what it costs you on the front end pales in comparison to what the mistakes cost you on the back end. So, Cody, I'm going to come back. Yeah, go ahead, Wayne. I'm sorry.
I'll just finish to your point about that. It's so much easier for us to change things on paper during the design phase than halfway through the project when you're standing in the field going, what do we do with the slope that's going to bring a bunch of water into this building? So, it's just spend your time in design. That's where you're going to save money.
And your time in design with people who have been there and done that and thus have seen what those problems are actually going to look like.
Yeah. Well, being able to
preferably bald, I might add. If they have no hair, it's a good sign that they know what they're talking about. Not that Wayne's the exception to that rule. Cody, I'm going to come back to you now. I want to talk a little bit about what Barry talked about with Heights. What are the tenants wanting? Is having a 16-foot ceiling a benefit? Is having a 20-foot ceiling a benefit? What are you seeing on the ground side of it? And then, of course, on the back end, when you're going to sell, is there a premium for adding that quality, or quality may be the wrong word, but that extra height to a building?
Well, you'll get that sale value out of that tenant and what they're paying in rent. And so obviously if you're offering a better product, you're going to get better rent. And so as far as ceiling heights goes, I don't like anything under 18 feet. You can't do mezzanine space under 18 feet. It's very difficult to do so. So I like that. And especially with a lot of these tenant bases that are renting flex space, they're renting these spaces and they're maximizing the space. I mean, I can't tell you how many, little drop shippers and e-commerce guys we've been into. And I mean, these things are stacked to the brim. And so anytime you can get higher ceiling heights, we like it. I like anything at 18 because the majority of your competition is 16 and under anyways across the US. So anytime you can beat them out on that helps. Like it allows the mezzanine space as well. And I think it also just makes the buildings look a little bit better.
Love it. I'm going to follow up on that. Mezzanine space, something that comes up a lot as a conversation. Obviously, typically you're charging a per square foot price. So the height doesn't necessarily play into how you're calculating what you're going to charge someone. your take on mezzanines as your you get people in your office that are leasing. Is there a value add there? And then on the flip side of it, when you're trying to sell the park, is it driving an NOI on a park that ultimately is going to be of value to the end buyer?
It does if you're getting more rent for the mezzanine space. That's what's going to help you out on the investment sales side. And I can tell you there's a lot of tenants that don't need mezzanine space whatsoever. That's fine. Our guys like offering it. We like having it because it's a great addition to add on to a space and to say, hey, your rent is 14 without it, or 15 and a half with it. And so as long as you're allocating that cost within there, make sure you're getting it back. And then obviously if you ever sell it, having that higher rental rate is going to help you. But mezzanine space is very key for a lot of people because, some people will use it as extra office space or additional storage space. And, even though it's not really square footage that you're accounting for on the investment sales side, you are accounting for that additional rent if you're getting it. But if you don't get additional rent for it, you don't need to be doing it.
Love it. I'm going to switch to something that I hear brought up quite a bit and I guess the first thing I would ask, and Cody, with the most experience, maybe the right guy to ask it, what's the size that you want to build these things at? Obviously, we know on the development side and Barry and Wayne, too small and it just doesn't pencil. You don't get the economies of scale that allow you to make a project that works. Is there a too big in a flex park? And what's that look like? Where's kind of the sweet spot? I know you said 1,500, 1,800 square foot units. What's the sweet spot as far as a total number of units or a total square footage you might have on a specific site?
Yeah, we start to see numbers make a lot more sense once you're going over 45,000 square feet, right? Anything under, a lot of your initial infrastructure costs and things of that nature are going to be there, whether you're at 10,000 or 40,000. And so you really start to see that cost savings once you get up to that number. Plus, for a lot of new developers as well, when you're 75,000 square feet, that's a friendly number for a lot of markets, right? It's very friendly on the management side too. You're dealing with 20, 30 tenants. And so that's a great number for anybody that, is coming from the storage side or anywhere else to build, because you're getting that a little bit of that cost saving, but you're also not overbuilding. And then determining how much not to build. I mean, it's pretty rare that we see parks getting built over, 180,000 square feet. I mean, we've seen them, we're working on one right now. It's 200,000 feet and 1,000 square foot units. So, I mean, that's a lot of tenants. Not everybody's 1,000 feet there. Some people have 3 and 4 units, but that is a lot. And that's something that you have to look at the market, and you want to make sure the market has that capacity to fill that product up. And so you're not sitting with, stagnant vacancy. But my favorite size is 45 to 75,000 square feet. We love selling that. The buyer pool's massive. It's much easier to manage, much easier to kind of grow a portfolio of those. If you want to build one here and then over here, you can replicate that model a lot easier because you're really only needing 3 to 5 acres to do it.
Love it. Guys, I appreciate your time. I'm going to start wrapping this thing up. I want to ask you some silly rapid fire questions to finish up. So we're going to have a little bit of fun. Cannot thank you all enough. Before we get into the rapid fire questions, I want to give everyone in the audience a chance to understand how to connect with you guys. So I'm going to start with Cody Payne. Flex Parks USA, you guys are doing everything, right? You're brokering. I lean on you guys all the time for your World Engine reports. For the people watching, know that they'll give you a report that will tell you, should you build this or not? They'll give you a score and a number. You guys have also started doing feasibility studies for those projects that get a little bit further along. And if you need banking and you need somebody who's a professional to really do a breakdown of what the site would look like, how does someone get a hold of Cody Payne and the Flex Parks USA team?
Easy. FlexParksUSA.com has everything you need there. If not, it's got our contact. You give us a shout. We can get anybody taken care of.
Love it. And he's Cody at Flex Parks USA as well. I will say from personal experience, I lean on him and Michael Tran and Austin very frequently to get me World Engine reports on sites, feasibilities, do an amazing job. Look out for those guys. Wayne Woolsey, Kiwi II Construction. Not Kiwi II Construction anymore. It's Kiwi II Steel. You just did a name change on me. It threw me off a little bit. How does somebody get a hold of you guys and get you in early so they can help with their projects?
Yes, similar, kiwiconstruction.com. You'll find all our information on that website, just reach out through that website. There's my email address. Feel free to contact me directly, and I'll put you through to the people that can help you get to the next step.
Everybody needs a guy like Eric behind the scenes. The viewers don't know Eric, but Eric's my behind the scenes guy, and he's the most reliable person in my life. Everyone needs that guy that has Wayne's email up right when we need it. Barry Sherman, S3 Partners. You guys obviously do a lot of project management work, a lot of owners rep work. I said you guys again, we. Underwriting, you name it, will help people. How do they get a hold of Barry Sherman and our team at S3 Partners?
Sure. S3.partners. Maybe Eric will throw the email address up there. Surrounded by a great team, everything from site selection to underwriting to project management, entitlements, and then construction management. So look forward to helping the industry out there. Thank you, Thad.
Very much appreciate it. And from my perspective, I'm surrounded by the best team, so appreciate you back very much. We're going to have a little bit of fun with this one. Barry Sherman, better football team in 2026. This one's just for your brother, Mark. Denver Broncos, New England Patriots.
Wow. Whew, that's loaded.
No pressure.
All right, the Denver Nuggets next.
Oh, then I got to go Celtics, man. All right, anyway, hopefully we see each other in the finals. We'll have a little bit of fun. Cody Payne, classic car, current car?
Classic.
Every time. All right, I'm going to follow up question with that. Now, cars or baby boy? Where's Cody's time going to?
Obviously my son, but we hang out in the cars quite a bit. He was actually helping me. I don't know if he was helping me, but he was hanging out with me and finishing up a Chevelle right now. And so he was in it the other day, knocking stuff over.
I love it. Wayne Woolsey, California, Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee.
I love it. He made the move here recently. Last question for Wayne. We'll finish up with this one. Kids or grandkids?
Oh, see, who's listening? Both. Yeah, look, both is equally important, but certainly being able to hang out with some grandkids is some fun times. Yeah.
I got July 23rd is the due date for my daughter, so I'm looking forward to joining you in that fraternity of grandfathers. Guys, again, I'll say what I said at the beginning. Superhero lineup of folks to get involved in this space. I can't urge the people that are listening anymore to reach out to any of these three people. Long before I worked for Barry or Wayne was a sponsor of my podcast, they would answer my call and share stuff with me. And Cody's been no different. Cody, I left you last because I knew them a little bit before you, but urge the audience to get a hold of these guys and pick their brain because they know as much as anybody on the planet about what it is we're talking about today. I want to thank all three of you for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedules to come and share your knowledge.
Yeah, thanks, Dad. Appreciate it.
That's it for this week's episode of Storage Unlocked. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Guy Sacento and Hano Montoya at PB Brown. Check those guys out. The cream of the crop for general contractors in storage and small bay flex. Cannot thank them enough for supporting Storage Unlocked. We'll see everybody next week.